Don Carlo is a man who believes that leadership is about relationships, not authority. He says that the power of a leader lies not in his shouting and screaming but in his calm and measured behavior. There's no doubt that he's a talented person when it comes to relationships. According to him, a coach has to understand that each player has different characters and motivations. The right thing is not for the players to adapt to me, but for me to adapt to them, he says. My style is not to impose my wishes on them. I would like to convince my players, even if it will take more time. If we listen to what he says about Carlo, there is no doubt that he managed to convince most of them. For example, Andrea Pirlo, who was an attacking midfielder until he met Ancelotti, says Ancelotti is like a father to me. It helped me play my best football in a different position, deeper. It changed my role on the field. My career changed thanks to him. Even though I didn't know how to defend, he put me in front of a defense and asked me to just use my brain. Another person who knows Carlo best is undoubtedly the legendary captain Paolo Maldini. Paolo, who was Carlo's teammate in his youth. Paolo also experienced playing under his management late in his career. People say I am the flag of Milan. If this is true, Carlo was the wind that made me wave. It was always very easy to play with him and to play for him. It would make things easier for you, says the captain. As it turns out, the biggest part of this profession is about convincing people, and Gennaro Gattuso, who has always been a confrontational character, does not appreciate the coach's understanding of the game and training methods, but he gives credit to his communication skills. Yes, Carlo may be 3 or 4 generations old, but he still holds the key to getting into the players' minds, so he's still the best in the business. It would be wrong to say that Ancelotti's first spell at Milan was completely without controversy. His biggest opposition came not from the stands or the media, but directly from the club president. Silvio Berlusconi believed that Milan should always play flashy, attack-oriented football on the field. The president, who frequently visited the training ground, insisted that the team should play 4-4-2. The general opinion of the media and football public was no different. So much so that after a match against Ajax at San Siro where they won 1-0, Dutch football legend Johan Cruyff criticized Ancelotti's Milan for playing boring and overly defensive football, and Carlo responded harshly by saying that if Johan wanted to have fun, he could go to the movies. Despite all this, it was Ancelotti's ability to get results that made it possible for him to stay at Milan for 8 years, and as quickly as possible. We are talking about the years when 4-2-3-1 had not been invented yet. The years when almost every team used double center-forward systems. There were 2 of the best in the Milan squad, Andriy Shevchenko and Filippo Inzaghi. Right behind them is Rui Costa, whom Tarim brought with him from Fiorentina. Ancelotti had placed Gattuso on the right side of this brilliant Registra and Seedorf on the left, while Alessandro Nesta, who was transferred from Lazio for an astronomical fee in the summer of 2002, became the captain's new partner at the center of the defense. Ancelotti completed the defensive quartet with defensive backs such as Simic and Kalasha. He chose the Brazilian Dida instead of the veteran Abiyat in the goal. Don Carlo took Milan back to the top of Europe after 9 years with this 4-4-2 diamond formation in his first full season at the helm of the team. Dida was the hero of the night, saving 3 penalties for the red and black team, who defeated Juventus in a penalty shootout in the 2030 Champions League final played at Old Trafford. This trophy was also the first trophy won by Ancelotti in a career that would be filled with success. The 2 Brazilians added to the team the following year would take Milan to a whole new level. One was Kaká, a 20-year-old handsome young man from Sao Paulo, and the other was Cafu, the best companion in history, according to many. Thanks to these 2 players, the attacking potential of the team increased significantly and Milan comfortably won the Serie A title, 11 points ahead of Roma. The only thing missing in a defensive line with Cafu on the right, Maldini on the left and Nesta in the center was a tough player who was good at aerial balls, and in the summer of 2004, they acquired one of the top appointment. This team, which came together in the summer of 2004, was shown as the absolute favorite of the match while reaching the most unforgettable Champions League final in history, in one of the most beautiful cities of the world in the spring of 2005. Moreover, they showed that this was not an unfair expectation with 3 goals they scored in just 45 minutes. But the British had not yet said their last words. Liverpool pulled off a miracle that evening at the Ataturk Olympic Stadium and won the game on penalties, after going from 3-3 in just 6 minutes, and claimed the cup. After such an epic night, all that is talked about is the winner. Nobody wants to talk about the delusions of the losing side. I guess what these people who made up the legendary Milan squad really felt after such a traumatic night, outside of their immediate circle. Nobody really cared. But on the other hand, there is no greater teacher for man than failure. Although our successes make us grow, failures make us mature. Could Ancelotti and the legendary Milan squad learn big lessons from this great defeat? No one spoke that evening. Complete dead silence. We were all as good as dead. Throughout the summer, I woke up every morning saying no, this isn't real. Alessandro Nesta. 6 minutes of madness. There was 6 minutes of madness and we lost everything we had. Carlo Ancelotti. Isn't that exactly why football is such a great game? No one can guarantee that the better team will always win. Sometimes, even though you are the superior side for most of the 90 minutes, 6 minutes can be as short as 6 minutes. Everything evaporates. You can't hold it back, you can't stop it. This game is played with people and every human emotion is also present in football. But overcoming this emotional crisis was not Milan's only challenge. In the summer, the country's sports agenda was literally boiling. The Calciopoli investigation that broke out, like many Italian clubs. It also created great uncertainty about Milan's future. Rumors were circulating that the club would be heavily sanctioned, including being banned from the Champions League. As a team with a high average age, time was already working against them and keeping this squad together would never be easy. Hernan Crespo, who played on loan for a season in Pipo's absence, returned to Chelsea. The following year, Jaap Stam, who was getting older and heavier, abandoned the ship. But undoubtedly Milan's biggest loss was the baby-faced killer who was transferred from Dynamo Kiev in 1999. Senko scored more than 170 goals with Milan alone, was Serie A's top scorer twice and won the Ballon d'Or award in 2004. Shiva had become one of the iconic players for this club and football fans could not imagine Milan without him. However, Chelsea's super-rich boss Abramovich paid £30 million for the Ukrainian and plucked him from Milan. The team had lost much of its destructive power. In fact, the Milan team did not communicate directly with the referees like Juventus, but it was determined that they tried to influence the referee observers. As a result, Milan were given an 8-point penalty and started the season with minus points. Creating teams competing for the championship in long marathons has never been Ancelotti's area of expertise. On top of that, with this 8-point disadvantage, it was the most logical decision for Milan to turn all their focus to the Champions League. Don Carlo needed to make a slight modification to his baklava. Because Ricardo Oliveira, who came from Real Betis to replace Shevchenko, would never make the expected impact in Milan. And he had a good reason. The Brazilian striker's sister was kidnapped for ransom and held hostage for 5 months. Ricardo said, "I couldn't play football at that time. I couldn't concentrate. Because I didn't even know if my brother was alive or not," he says. In this case, Carlo was left with Pipo as the center-forward and Alberto Gilardino, who was transferred from Parma the previous year. At first he tried to use these two side by side, but it didn't take long to realize that they were extremely incompatible. Moreover, in the mid-2000s, double center-forward systems were slowly becoming obsolete. While even the most loyal fans of the 4-4s such as Arsene Wenger and Alex Ferguson have changed the system, Carlo, who believed in the system according to the player rather than the player according to the system, could not be expected to be stubborn either. This is how the famous Christmas tree came into being. One of the Gilardino and Inzaghi duo should have played alone in the future. Ancelotti used these two alternately throughout the season and managed to benefit from both. Behind the single center-forward was the duel of Prime Kaká and Seedorf. The Brazilian was one of the 2 or 3 best players in the world at that time. He played football like water. So fluid, so clear. He had so many weapons that it was almost impossible to stop him. Shooting, passing, dribbling, right foot, left foot, speed, game intelligence. He was a complete football player. Her partner, Clarence Seedorf, was like the colloquial equivalent of the term underrated in those days. Strong, hard-working and technical like a bull. I think if he had been born 20 or 25 years later, he would have been an invaluable football player today. Moreover, Clarence was one of Milan's many on-field leaders. A leader who can speak 6 languages. As competent as this team, which formed the sharp end of the Christmas tree, was at finishing, the man at the trunk of the tree was equally adept at initiating an attack. Pirlo, who has adapted to his role well over the past 5 years, was like a maestro orchestrating the entire team with a baton in his hand. It was always played at the pace Andrea wanted. This unique ability to control tempo earned him the nickname metronome. She had a grace that seemed effortless. Of course, you can't play this game only with artists like Pirlo. To create a comfort zone for people like him, you need warriors like Gattuso and Ambrosini. Especially Gattuso was a slightly psychologically disturbed man. When I lost a match, I would break everything I could get my hands on, Gennaro says. Today, the losing players take selfies and upload them to the internet. An opponent trying to cross the midfield with the ball was like enemy troops trying to cross the border for Gattuso and Ambrosini. It was their duty to make Andrea's job easier and to save her energy. A team with such a crowded and dense center had to get width and offensive contribution from its fullbacks. On the right, Cafu was already perfect for this job. But now he was 37 years old. His alternative, Massimo Otto, performed as well as Cafu in many matches in the Champions League that year. The name Ancelotti trusted on the left side was Czech Marek Jankulovski. He is one of the least noticed and least appreciated players on the team. However, he was the one who played the most time that season after Pirlo and Kaká. Marek was a disciplined player with high consistency. You can't expect anything less from a Central European anyway. And finally, that defensive tandem that has never gotten old over the years. With Jankulovski taking over the left line, the captain moved to the center again, partnered by Alessandro Nesta. No need to say more. If we were to list the 10 best defenders in history today, we couldn't imagine a list without Maldini and Nesta. This structure, where two fullbacks attack at once, would not be possible and would not survive without them. With penalty-saving expert Dida behind them, Ancelotti's Christmas tree-looking Milan team set its sights on the top of Europe again. Milan's Champions League journey started with a group stage that we can say to its teeth. Their opponents are AEK Athens, Lille and Anderlecht. While the first 4 matches of the group were left behind, Milan conceded only 1 goal and collected 10 points, securing their place in the last 16 rounds. Although the remaining 2 matches turned into a formality, Milan lost away to AEK and against Lille at San Siro. The team, which could not even score a goal in these 2 matches, did not shine like a champion, even though it finished as the leader of its group. Without Shevchenko, Milan was no longer seen as the favorite of this cup but as a placeholder. Their opponents in the last 16 were Celtic and Milan were the absolute favorites in this matchup at least. The match in Scotland ended in a goalless draw. In the rematch at San Siro, Kaká would have to carry his team on his back with his famous slaloms in order to break the resistance of the Scottish team. An understated victory earned by the Brazilians' one-man show. The next opponent was Bayern Munich, who eliminated Real Madrid in the last 16. Ottmar Hitzfeld was running the German Panzer, and the experienced coach had previously won this cup with both Borussia Dortmund and the Bavarian team. The first game at the San Siro was a 90-minute battle of nerves. Even though Milan played their best, they could not break the match. This time, Andrea Pirlo used his intelligent mind, which he usually uses to think, to kick the ball and put Milan ahead. However, the guest team responded with the giant defender Van Buiten. As usual, Ancelotti was taking out all his stress on the gum he was chewing brutally. 5 minutes before the end, Kaká's compatriot Luciolán took the penalty and converted it into a goal. But in 90+3, Van Buiten took the stage once again and equalized the score again with his weak foot. Bayern was the side that got what it wanted from this match full of surprises. Milan had no choice but to beat its strong rival in Germany to pass the round. They met in Munich a week later for the rematch. Don Carlo had made only 1 change to his starting 11. Bayern defense's aerial artillery. Despite his superiority, Van Buiten was a heavy centre-back who was not strong and preferred Inzaghi, who is famous for his conditions behind the defense, instead of Gilardino. According to Ancelotti, the differences that determine the winner at these levels have always been about small details. And this one small change would give him what he wanted away in Munich. Milan took the lead with Seedorf's goal in the 27th minute. 4 minutes later. This time the Dutchman put Pipo behind the defense and the difference increased to 2. Milan got the score they wanted earlier than expected and they held on to this advantage in the remaining part. The final was now just 2 games away. If this journey excited you, you can support us by subscribing and liking the video. Yes, Milan did a great job by eliminating Bayern Munich. But the sensational team of the quarterfinals that year was Manchester United, which eliminated another Italian representative, Roma. During the Ferguson era, the Red Devils have always been one of the most dangerous teams in this tournament. This time, Sir combined the experience of Giggs and Scholes with the energy of Rooney and Ronaldo, who were in their early 20s. This new model United scored 7 goals against Roma at Old Trafford. And yes, you guessed it right, the last obstacle Milan had to overcome to reach the final was Manchester United. The first match in England witnessed a perfect goal, says Lasuna. It was one of the toughest nights of both goalkeepers' careers. It was a great match where the audience had their fill of football. Manchester United won 3-2 with a wonderful goal from Rooney in the final minutes. However, the fact that Kaká can steal the show even in such a match is an indication of how great a football player he is. As a matter of fact, the moment of the match that is etched in memory and even went down in tournament history. It was that extraordinary goal that the Brazilian scored by knotting Patrice Evra and Gabriel Heinz together. The away goals rule kept the Italians' hopes alive before the rematch at San Siro. Even a 1-goal win would be enough to get their ticket to the final. However, Milan started the match in such a way that, with the support of their fans, they fell on United like a nightmare. The goal was imminent and he left the stage again in the 11th minute. Kaká scored his 10th goal in the Champions League that season, ending the top scorer race early. Without it, they found 2-0 with Seedorf. The goals were coming like pouring rain in Milan that evening. In the 78th, Gilardino brought the score to 3-0 and United failed to qualify from the San Siro. I don't know whether to call it fate or a strange coincidence, but their opponents in the final were the same damn team. It's Liverpool who gave them the nightmare 2 years ago. It is hard to even imagine the tension in the Milan dressing room before the final match in Athens. This team could be made up of extremely experienced and leader-spirited players. But they still had so many reasons to be uneasy. Ancelotti describes the pre-finale as follows. They were very nervous. I could feel it. Sometimes, instead of pumping up your players, you need to lower their pulse. What I tried to do before the match. Yes, perhaps if the Milan team had gone on the field swearing revenge, the result would have been disappointing again. But they managed to stay calm and play smart, including Gattuso. Carlo chose Inzaghi as the center forward in the final match. Pippo was a strange man. His skills with the ball were extremely limited and so he would never engage in polemics with him. He rarely came off-site and would drive his teammates crazy when they planned to pass him the ball. Not to mention the fact that he is a player who gets injured frequently. If he had been able to overcome these problems at some point in his career, he could be remembered as a much greater football player today. Despite all that, he was an incredible finisher. Where the Pippo final match was played. And like many players on that roster, he was perhaps using his last chance to win something. Inzaghi had finally found the right evening to escape offside and found a champion in a Milan that was without Shevchenko at the end of his career. He made his mark in the Champions League final with 2 goals. This time they weren't going to leave it to penalties. Captain Maldini and co lifted the 7th Champions League trophy in the club's history that evening in Athens. Indeed, once upon a time, AC Milan was used to being the biggest in Europe.